This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We begin with the president tonight and the presidential entourage. The president has established some new rules for air travel for his senior staff. We'll get to policy in a moment, but we begin with the president's health. There was another series of tests today, and as a result, the president's condition has a name. Mr. Bush has Graves' disease. In a fairly remarkable coincidence, he has the same disease as Mrs. Bush. It is not grave, but it is going to force the president to cut back on his schedule, at least for now. Here's our medical correspondent, George Strait.
Soon after Mr. Bush arrived at the hospital this morning, tests revealed his entire thyroid gland was not functioning properly and was producing 35% more hormones than normal. His doctors gave him a few ounces of radioactive iodine, which will eventually shrink the thyroid, cure its hyperactivity, and the heart irregularity it caused.
With correction of the thyroid overactivity, the tendency toward atrial fibrillation will probably disappear.
Mr. Bush will also be taking iodine pills to more rapidly restore normal thyroid activity. Until it is normal, he will be kept on his heart medications. Monday morning, you said that the president suffered no other problems that you could find other than the arrhythmia. 24 hours later, we find out that he's got a hyperactive thyroid. Can we expect any more surprises in the future?
I can't believe that we're going to have any more surprises. None of us here expect any.
The radioactive iodine the president took this morning will cause him to emit very low-level radiation for a few days. It's not dangerous, but he's been told to avoid hugging his grandchildren for a while.
Great. It just takes something to do with the thyroid, and the heart is perfect. So I'm very lucky, very, very lucky.
Doctors say Graves' disease is not communicable, and that it is just a coincidence that he and his wife suffer from the same thyroid problem. At a fundraiser, Mrs. Bush laughed about it.
Did you know it was catching? Now he's going to go around the house calling me Thyroid Mary.
Mr. Bush has been ordered to slow down for a while. He still plans to make 2 out-of-town trips in the next 3 days, but a 4th trip will be handled by the vice president. George Strait, ABC News, Washington.
Now to the new presidential policy. The White House has issued new guidelines today that spell out when Mr. Bush's chief of staff, John Sununu, and other administration officials may fly on a military jet. Certain trips, like ski vacations, may no longer be allowed. At the White House, here's ABC's Britt Hume.
The new travel policy is likely to make the chief of staff, who was only briefly visible at the White House today, a much less frequent flyer on military planes. It was accompanied, though, by a finding that his Air Force travel so far was, quote, essentially proper. From now on, for example, if the governor or other top official wants to take a military plane, as Sununu did last weekend to Florida for a commencement speech, he will have to clear the trip or any other with the White House counsel. Use of military planes will only be permitted when, quote, security, communications, or scheduling require. If the trip is primarily personal, there must also be a finding of an immediate and compelling need, such as a family illness. Political trips on military planes would be forbidden, unless the trip is primarily for some other official mission and the president himself approves it. The secretaries of state and defense, as well as the attorney general, are exempted from the restrictions because of what's described as their constant need for secure communications and personal security. Much of the criticism of Sununu's military travel is focused on trips to New Hampshire and Colorado on ski holidays mixed with speeches or charitable events. Counsel Gray found the trips okay under existing policy, except for one trip to New Hampshire, not this one, which was for a private charity and should not have been at government expense. Gray blames this on what he called an innocent misunderstanding of existing policy. Counsel Gray also said the governor should not have charged the taxpayers for a trip to Boston to see his dentist. Sununu declared himself pleased with Gray's findings, which do seem an adroit bit of legal work. The White House counsel finds that the chief of staff to whom he reports didn't do anything wrong, but at the same time he issues rules that will keep him from doing it anymore. Britt Hume, ABC News, the White House.
In a moment, the other news, a Florida prosecutor brings charges of sexual battery for an alleged assault at the Kennedy family compound in Florida. Another reason why it may be difficult for the U.S. to get out of Iraq in a hurry. And on the American agenda tonight, the dangers of abuse in a reporting system that is supposed to protect children.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, brought to you by Stearns Miracle-Gro.